The diet of longevity in Sardinia is more a verb than a noun because there were at least 3 phases.
Okay.
Until about 1960, believe it or not, most of what they ate was bread and cheese. These shepherds had several different kinds of bread, sourdough usually, but also a flatbread called carta de musica. They were shepherds, so these men would go into their pastures.
Olive oil, though, wouldn't they?
Olive oil, but not as much as you think. The highlands of Sardinia, the terrain is very rugged and not conducive to the olive groves like you would see. Actually, more mastic oil, believe it or not, in the 40s and 50s. But to your point, olive oil is now ubiquitous in Sardinia. In about 1960s, roads came in. And remember, centenarians were alive. They were middle-aged in 1960s.
Amazing.
Their diet shift. They were still poor people, and they relied very heavily on huge gardens. And pasta started to come in. But there's more gnocchi than there is pasta. A lot of dishes made with fava beans. And, of course, their celebratory food was pork. Never beef, very little chicken. But on average, about 5 times a month, they would eat pork, the family pig.
5 times a month. So this
Yeah,
is a very, very low level of meat eating you're describing.
Very low level. The average
and
American...
I guess if they're in the mountains, they're not eating a lot of fish either?
No. In fact, you can see the ocean from the blue zone of Sardinia. But I met several centenarians that first time they ate fish in their life when they're in their 20s.
Okay.
And that's because it took a day to get to the sea. They didn't have a fishing culture, but maybe they get some fish. But by the time they got it back up to their village, it stunk. So you'd see this sort of dried cod once in a while, bacalao, they called it, and they reconstitute that. But it wasn't. We tend to think fish is associated with longevity, but not a lot of fish in the blue zones.
I think a lot of people will be surprised by that because there's such a lot of talk about protein today and this idea that we're all short of protein. And you can find, if you walk into the grocery store, right, an enormous number of things saying high in protein, which suggests, oh my God,
marketing.
I'm like low on protein.
But you probably know this, but a CDC, Center for Disease Controls in America, they tell us that the average American gets about twice the amount of protein they need. So we're getting way more protein than we need. And
when you
I
look
think
at these
people don't
blows,
realize that you can get all the protein you need out of plant-based sources. So you don't need meat to be healthy. Meat tastes good, but...
And this low level of eating like meat and fish, is that common across the blue zones?
Yes, all blue zones. There's a subset of Adventists who eat no meat at all. The highest meat consumption in the blue zones, I would say, is in Costa Rica. And it's not that they don't like it. It's not that they're, more virtuous and they care about the environment, or they care about animal suffering. They just couldn't afford it. And as soon as you were beginning to mention, as soon as roads come in and they start adopting a more Western or American way of life, their meat consumption has skyrocketed, their processed food consumption has skyrocketed. At the same time, diabetes has skyrocketed, heart disease. And in one of the blue zones, Okinawa, it produced the longest lived, healthiest people in the history of the world. And now they're the least healthy prefecture in all of Japan, largely because of the fast food restaurants,
and this
thanks
is
to the
within
American
the
film.
period, basically, that
Since I started studying them in 20 years.
That's
they've gone from
incredibly
the longest lived
sad.
people on the planet to the least healthy people in Japan, largely because of the American food culture. I'm very sorry.
And of course, as soon as you start getting cheap meat on the plate, it's not so much the effect of that meat, but the fact it displaces all those healthy beans and other vegetables that they were eating before. So I think people have got this idea about a dichotomous view of meat as it's either healthy or unhealthy, rather than the fact that, okay, if we take away ultra-processed meats, which are nearly everyone agrees are unhealthy, natural, well-cooked meat is fine, but it displaces, there's just no room on your plate. If you're having meat every day, you can't have the same level of other vegetables, legumes, etc., that kept these populations so healthy. So this is, I think, one reason. And also we talk about this a lot in nutrition. Sarah always talk about it. It's instead of what. We take it, it's not just one thing it has to be in context. So as you said, Okinawa, they've displaced a lot of the good stuff with the bad stuff. And so some of it is the bad stuff coming in, but a lot of it is they're no longer having the good stuff because there's, their minds and plates are full of other stuff.
One of your other guests, Walter Willett, famously said about meat, it's a lot like radiation. We know a lot will kill you, but we don't quite know the safe level. And if you look at blue zones, the suggestion of 5 times per month seems to be associated, or it doesn't seem to be getting in the way of them living long, largely chronic disease-free lives.
And it's interesting about the fish also, because I think most people listening to this there will be some exceptions. A lot of people are like, yeah, okay, I sort of know that red meat's not good for me. But a lot of people, and I think Sarah might be here also talking about the positive benefits of fish. So it's quite interesting that is not
I'm not
something
saying
that
it's not good for
I know
you.
you're not saying it, but you're not saying it's interesting that hasn't been an essential component to
That's
be a
right.
blue zone, because I might have expected that to have been like, they will definitely be eating quite a lot of fish in their diet as a complement. So, maybe not a huge total amount of calories, but that was a really important nutrient. But it sounds like you're saying that actually fish eating is not essential to being one of these blue zones and being
That's
an
right,
essential
for
area.
sure it's not. But you have to realize, as I said before, the diet's a verb. It's changed dramatically, especially in the last 20 years. And they're almost caught up with the rest of Italy in the case of Sardinia, or exceeded Japan in the case of Okinawa at embracing this ultra-processed, meat-heavy diet.
So you're basically telling a story that the blue zones are
They're
disappearing.
going to hell.
Is that really the sort of...
Well,
Which is quite sad, because we're all reading everything about how our climate is being destroyed and the world is falling apart, and you have been seeing almost in your own lifetime the way in which these patterns that were so healthy are falling away.
That's right. But yes, and
It's
even
hard
though
to be isolated, though, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
that's the other thing, is you get contaminated by cultures and pressures and marketing that's global. And so it's very hard for these, say, mountain villages, around the world to stay isolated in their bubble. And I think that's the other thing we're seeing. It's like, you used to only be, if you had to live on the coast to eat fish. Now it's frozen and, everyone can get it in their freezer.
I guess the other thing that's really interesting is it tells you that this is a bit by chance, is what you're saying. It's not like these people in these zones were like, this is my absolute favorite food and I'm choosing to eat it because it's my favorite food and it's making me healthy. Actually, it was sort of, they were quite poor. This was like what was available and that they could support where they are. And then when we've suddenly been offered all of this meat and candy and all the rest of it, you're saying they weren't like, I don't want any of that. Actually, they're like, oh, okay, that sounds tasty. And unexpectedly, this is then affecting their health. Is that the
Well,
story
there's
of
a
what's going on,
generational
or?
shift. The diets of the blue zones, I wrote about them in the Blue Zone Kitchen. There's a lot of ingenuity and intentionality in creating these recipes. It's usually the women who maintain the food tradition. And they are genius at taking these very simple, inexpensive peasant foods and making them taste delicious. And they have a taste for them. So the cohort of people over 60 in Okinawa, for example, still have the highest concentration of centenarians in the world. It's the 20-year-olds who started eating the burgers and the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and their taste buds have been napalmed, and they're now used for the richer, fattier, enhanced flavored
You
foods.
immediately play straight into my guilt as a parent about the fact that I'm not bringing my children up well enough to appreciate the sort of food that I know is good for their health. They were exposed to all of this very easy to eat food, which tastes really sugary fast and lots of meat and all the rest of it. And if you get that you're saying, I think that because they've been exposed to that early, it's like, well, that's delicious. And this is, of course, what I would choose over this other food, which is also probably harder to prepare. Being a parent is really hard, particularly I think being a mother in most cases is still today primary care. But it's really hard to juggle all of this. So I think that in the reality of the food that's around and available, I think there's enough guilt around parenting. So I think that is a bit the reality of the environment we're in. And the question is, how can we make it easier? And so I think it is hard, right? This is what we're...
misinformation,
Yeah, I agree. It's a lack of education. It's not, I don't think it's anyone's fault. They're told your kid will only have processed apple puree from a little can that's got a baby picture on it. Realizing actually they can pretty much eat anything. And in that 2-year window, they are really inquisitive and they will eat all kinds of stuff that they won't eat when they're 3. And so you have that very narrow time to really expand and no one is telling parents this.